Zainab was the kind of girl who turned heads, not just because of her beauty, but because of the aura she carried. Her curves were a gift of nature, her figure a perfect hourglass that seemed to defy logic. She had full hips that swayed with every step, a small waist that accentuated her voluptuousness, and a bust that made even other girls glance twice. Her skin was a smooth shade of dark chocolate that seemed to shimmer under the African sun, yet behind her captivating exterior was a young woman wrestling with the gnawing ache of unfulfilled desires. As you are enjoying this tale of fate, kindly hit the subscribe button, like, and turn on the notification bell, so you'll be notified when the next part is out. Born into a humble family in a small town in Nigeria, Zainab's parents were the definition of hard work and sacrifice. Her father, a retired civil servant, and her mother, a petty trader, scraped every kobo together to send their daughter to a decent institution of learning. They believed education was the only inheritance they could offer her, a weapon that would arm her against the harsh realities of life. But Zainab saw the world through a different lens. From an early age, she had been drawn to the sparkle of wealth. She watched the glamorous lives of social media influencers, saw the latest designer bags, exotic vacations, and luxury cars. The contrast between her reality and their seemingly perfect lives gnawed at her. The small, overcrowded room she shared with her siblings, the worn-out sandals she patched time and again, all of it felt like a cruel joke. Her parents did their best, but their best was never enough for Zainab. She yearned for more than what her father's modest pension could provide or what her mother's stall could earn. And so, when she finally got admitted into a university in a bustling city, she saw it not just as an academic pursuit, but as an escape, a portal to the life she fantasized about. It didn't take long for Zainab to notice the divide on campus. There were the rich kids, the ones who pulled up in sleek cars, wore designer outfits, and casually flaunted the latest iPhones. Then there were the others, like her, who barely scraped by, calculating every meal and saving up for the next handout from home. One afternoon, as she scrolled through Instagram in her cramped hostel room, she sighed deeply. "I can't keep living like this," she muttered, throwing her outdated phone onto her mattress. Her roommate, Amaka, who was applying layers of lip gloss in front of a small cracked mirror, smirked. "Then stop living like this," Amaka said, her tone laced with a mix of sarcasm and pity. Zainab shot her a look. "And how exactly am I supposed to do that? My parents can barely afford my tuition, let alone give me money for all these flashy things." Amaka chuckled. "Z, you're beautiful, and not just normal beautiful. You have what these men want. You just need to know how to use it." The turning point came at a party she attended with Amaka. It was a lavish gathering at an upscale club, the kind of place Zainab had only seen on Instagram. The air was thick with expensive perfume and the clinking of champagne glasses. Girls with long, silky weaves laughed and danced as young men, some barely older than Zainab, tossed wads of cash into the air. Amaka leaned in close, her lips brushing against Zainab's ear. "You see these guys? They're Yahoo boys. They have money, lots of it. If you want the good life, you have to roll with them." Zainab's heart pounded. She felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. "But what do they want in return?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Amaka smirked. "Just your company, and maybe a little more if you play your cards right. It's a small price for a big life." At first, Zainab was hesitant. She remembered her mother's tired face, her father's worn-out shoes, and the countless sacrifices they had made. But then she looked down at her own faded dress and scuffed shoes. The temptation was too strong. Before long, Zainab found herself drawn into a circle of wayward girls, those who had long abandoned the simple dreams their families had for them. These girls knew how to charm, how to dress, and how to catch the attention of the city's wealthiest young men, many of whom were involved in internet fraud, Yahoo boys. Her transformation was swift. Gone were the modest outfits her mother had packed for her. Instead, she now wore body-hugging dresses, towering heels, and makeup that highlighted every sharp angle of her face. She started skipping lectures, spending more time at clubs and luxury hotels than in the library. With each passing day, Zainab's appetite for luxury grew more insatiable. She began receiving expensive gifts. An iPhone here, a designer bag there, and with each new acquisition, she felt a step closer to the life she had always wanted. She posted pictures on Instagram showing off her soft life with captions like, "God's favorite," and "Living my best life." Her following grew, and so did the illusion she carefully curated. Her parents' calls became a nuisance. Their reminders about staying focused on her studies like an annoying buzz in the background. "I'm busy, Mama," Zainab would often say, cutting the call short whenever her mother's concerned voice pushed through the speaker. One evening, after a particularly extravagant night out, Zainab stumbled into her hostel room, the scent of alcohol still on her breath. Amaka was waiting for her, a sly grin on her face. "Welcome to the good life, Z. There's no going back now." Zainab smiled, but deep down, a flicker of something, maybe doubt, maybe fear, gnawed at her. Little did she know, every step she took into this glittering world was pulling her further away from the solid ground beneath her feet. Zainab's descent into the wildlife was not sudden. It was a slow, intoxicating spiral. At first, she told herself it was just a phase, a small taste of the luxury she had always dreamed of. But soon the lines blurred between fantasy and reality, and before she knew it, the girl from a humble background had become a permanent fixture in a world of fast money, flashy cars, and careless nights. Her once neatly arranged class schedule became nothing more than a forgotten piece of paper crumpled at the bottom of her designer handbag. She missed school programs, lectures, assignments, and tests, always promising herself she would catch up, but never did. Zainab's only connection to her education was the few exams she managed to sit for, and even those were mere formalities, thanks to the sorting culture that lurked in the shadows of her institution. "Don't stress, babe," Amaka would often tell her. "You've got the looks, and these lecturers, they know better than to fail a girl like you." Zainab would laugh, tossing her long, silky weave over her shoulder, but there was an unease that crept into her heart. She knew she was barely hanging on academically, but the wildlife had its claws in her too deep for her to pull away. Her voluptuous figure became her greatest weapon and her biggest curse. Full hips that moved like poetry when she walked, a chest that made even women glance twice, and skin so smooth and radiant it seemed to glow under the sun. The way her body curved in all the right places was a magnet, drawing in men like moths to a flame. It wasn't just the YAHOO boys who noticed. Even her lecturers, men old enough to be her father, couldn't hide the glimmer of desire in their eyes. "Zainab," Professor Olamide once said after class, his voice a low purr, "you've been missing my lectures. That's not good for your grades, but perhaps we can find a way to fix that." His gaze lingered too long on her chest, his smile too sly for comfort. She forced a polite smile, her stomach churning. "I'll try to do better, sir." "Try harder," he said, slipping a piece of paper with his number into her hand. "Call me." Zainab didn't call, but she knew others who did. Girls like Amaka, who laughed about their special meetings, with lecturers that ended with good grades and heavier pockets. The nights were a blur of loud music, popping bottles, and expensive hotel suites. The YAHOO boys adored her. Or at least, they adored her body. Zainab had something they craved, a voluptuous figure that could stop traffic. Full hips that moved like poetry when she danced, a curvaceous chest that drew every pair of eyes in the room, and skin so smooth and radiant it seemed to glow in the dim lights of the clubs. Their meeting points became well known among her circle. There was the lavish rooftop bar at the city's most expensive hotel, the dimly lit lounges where money flowed like water, and the exclusive beach houses where the rich and reckless gathered. It was always the same scene. Girls dressed in barely their outfits, their faces painted to perfection, laughing too loud and drinking too much. Boys flashing wads of cash, throwing money in the air just to watch it rain down like confetti. "Hey, baby," a voice would purr in her ear as a thick wad of cash was slipped into her hand. "Go get yourself something nice." And she would smile, a trained, practiced smile that hid the emptiness gnawing at her from the inside. Her Instagram page became a gallery of perfection, posing by poolsides with designer sunglasses, clinking champagne glasses in VIP sections, and snapping selfies in the passenger seats of luxurious cars. To the world, she was living the dream. To her parents, she was simply too busy with schoolwork to return their calls. The lies became easier. "Mama, I'm preparing for a big test," she'd say when her mother's worried voice cracked through the phone. "I'm okay, just busy." Her father's voice was softer. "Zainab, we know you're trying your best. Just don't forget why we sent you there." But Zainab had already forgotten, or at least that's what she told herself. One particular night stood out, a lavish birthday party hosted by a notorious Yahoo boy known as Flex. The venue was an upscale beach house, filled with exotic drinks, blaring music, and girls dressed in barely their outfits. Flex had his pick of women that night, but his eyes kept lingering on Zainab. "You're the hottest girl here," he whispered to her, his breath reeking of alcohol. "Stick with me, and you'll never have to worry about anything again." The words were meant to be flattering, but they felt like chains tightening around her. As the night dragged on, Zainab found herself in a haze of flashing lights and deafening music. Boys fought for her attention, not because they cared, but because possessing a girl like Zainab was another way to prove their dominance. She wasn't a person to them, she was a status symbol. Her friends were no different. Emaka, with her bold curves and daring outfits, soaked up the attention just as much as Zainab did. There was Lola, whose sharp tongue and long legs made her a favorite among the older Yahoo boys. They were a trio, the queens of the night, and every party was a new stage for them to perform. "Girl, Flex can't take his eyes off you," Emaka whispered, giggling as she adjusted her revealing dress. "You're gonna make serious cash tonight." Zainab laughed, but it felt hollow. "Yeah, I guess." And deep down, a voice she tried so hard to silence kept screaming, "This isn't the life you wanted." But with every new gift, every roll of cash slipped into her hands, and every empty compliment whispered into her ear, that voice grew fainter, until one day it disappeared completely. The night air was thick with the scent of perfume, alcohol, and desperation. Zainab, now a regular at the most exclusive parties, had become a prized gem in the wild nightlife. Her transformation was complete. The shy girl from a humble background was long gone, replaced by a bold, confident woman draped in designer clothes and dripping with artificial glamour. But behind the fake lashes and red lipstick was a heart slowly rotting away. It was at one of these lavish parties that Zainab first laid eyes on Malik. He wasn't like the other Yahoo boys, the loud, arrogant types who threw money in the air like it was confetti. No, Malik was different. He was calm, calculated, and dangerously charming. His tall frame was wrapped in a tailored black kaftan that hugged his broad shoulders and hinted at a muscular build beneath. His skin was a rich, dark shade of ebony, smooth and flawless. A gold chain rested against his chest, and his wrist shimmered with an expensive Rolex. But it was his face that held Zainab captive. His jaw was sharp and defined, his beard neatly trimmed. His eyes, dark and intense, seemed to pierce through her, and when he smiled, that slow, confident smirk, it sent a shiver down her spine. Malik wasn't just a man, he was a fantasy. The kind of guy girls like Zainab dreamed about but could never touch. He was rumored to be from Kaduna, a prince of the Yahoo world, known not just for his wealth, but for his ruthlessness. Some whispered about his involvement in dark rituals, sacrifices meant to seal his fortune. But Zainab blinded by his charm, brushed the rumors aside. "See," Amaka nudged her, noticing her dazed expression. "Malik is watching you. Girl, this is your shot." Zainab's heart raced as Malik sauntered toward her. The music thumped in the background, but all she could hear was the sound of her own breathing. "You're the most beautiful woman here," Malik said, his voice smooth like silk. Zainab's lips parted, a practiced smile spreading across her face. "Thank you, you're not too bad yourself." He chuckled softly, his fingers lightly tracing a circle around the rim of his glass. "I like confidence in a woman. What's your name?" "Zainab." "Zainab," he repeated slowly, as if savoring the taste of her name. "Beautiful name for a beautiful girl." From that moment, Zainab was hooked. Malik wasn't like the other boys who chased her like hungry wolves. He made her feel like she was the one doing the chasing, and that drove her wild. The following days were a blur of extravagant dates, late-night calls, and expensive gifts. Malik took her to private beach houses, draped her in designer clothes, and filled her room with luxurious perfumes. He made her feel special, like she was finally living the life she deserved. Her friends, Amaka and Lola, couldn't stop gushing about it. "Z, you hit the jackpot," Amaka said one afternoon, flipping her braids over her shoulder. "Malik is the real deal. You better hold on tight." But there was something darker lurking beneath Malik's charm. Late one night, as they lounged in a hotel suite overlooking the city, Malik's phone kept buzzing. He ignored the calls at first, but after the fifth ring, his demeanor shifted. "Excuse me," he muttered, stepping onto the balcony. Zainab, curious, leaned closer to the window to catch snippets of his conversation. His voice was low, but his words were sharp. "They have to be ready by tomorrow night," he said, his tone brooking no argument. "I don't care how you do it, just make sure they don't suspect a thing." Her heart thudded in her chest. She didn't understand what he meant, but a cold fear crept up her spine. The next night, Malik invited Zainab and her friends to a secluded hotel for a special party. The invitation seemed like a dream come true. An exclusive event with the richest boys in town, promising even more money, gifts, and fun. Amaka and Lola were ecstatic. "Zay, this is it! We're going to be rolling in cash," Lola squealed, adjusting her tight dress. But Zainab couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in her gut. Still, the pull of Malik's charm and the life he offered was too strong. As they arrived at the hotel, the atmosphere shifted. The usual loud music and bright lights were absent. Instead, the air felt heavy, and the men waiting for them, including Malik, had a sinister glimmer in their eyes. It was only then that Zainab realized the party was not about fun or luxury. It was about something much darker, and she had walked straight into the lion's den. The room was suffocating. The air, once laced with the faint scent of perfume and alcohol, now reeked of fear. Zainab's heart thudded violently against her ribs as the realization sank in. This wasn't just a party, it was a trap. Malik's once charming smile was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating stare. The other men in the room, all sleekly dressed YAHOO boys with gold chains and dark intentions, began closing in. Amaka and Lola were giggling still, too drunk on the promise of money and lavish gifts to notice the shift in atmosphere. "Malik?" Zainab's voice wavered, but she forced herself to stand tall. "What's going on? Where are the other guests?" He didn't answer. Instead, he exchanged a knowing glance with a thick-set man to his right, a man with a cruel scar running down his cheek. The hotel suite, once a symbol of luxury, now felt like a cage. The blinds were drawn, the doors locked, and the music, soft, unsettling jazz, played in the background like a twisted soundtrack to their impending doom. "Relax, baby girl," Malik finally spoke, his voice smooth as ever, but hollow. "The real party's about to begin." Zainab's stomach churned. She grabbed Amaka's arm, her nails digging into her friend's skin. "We need to go, now." Maka frowned, pulling away. "Z, chill. Malik's got us. We're good." "No, we're not," Zainab hissed through clenched teeth. "Look around you." It was then that Amaka's glazed eyes finally cleared enough to register the predatory stares of the men surrounding them. The reality hit her like a punch to the gut. "Lola," Zainab whispered, but Lola was already draped over one of the Yahoo boys, oblivious. Malik clapped his hands. "All right, let's get started." The scarred man reached into his pocket, pulling out a small, sinister-looking dagger. The other men smirked, their eyes gleaming with dark anticipation. Panic surged through Zainab's veins. This wasn't a robbery. This wasn't a simple ploy to exploit their beauty for money. This was something far more sinister. A ritual. A sacrifice. "Run!" Zainab screamed, grabbing Amaka by the wrist and bolting toward the door. But the scarred man was faster. He lunged at them, blocking their path, his dagger catching the light in a menacing flash. Amaka shrieked, her voice breaking with terror. Zainab's heart pounded like a war drum. Desperation took over, and she did the only thing she could think of. She grabbed a glass bottle from the table and smashed it against the scarred man's head. He staggered back, blood trickling down his face. "Go!" Zainab roared, pushing Amaka forward. They darted down the narrow hotel hallway, their heels clattering against the marble floors. Behind them, the enraged shouts of Malik and his men echoed through the corridor. But Lola wasn't with them. "Lola," Amaka cried, turning back. "She's gone," Zainab choked out, her voice cracking. "We can't save her now." Hot tears burned her eyes, but survival was the only thing that mattered. As they reached the stairwell, Malik's voice rang out. "You can't run from me, Zainab. You belong to me." Fear gripped her, but she pushed through, dragging Amaka down the stairs. Her body screamed in pain. The scrape of the scarred man's dagger had caught her shoulder earlier, and blood now soaked the sleeve of her designer dress. Each step down the stairwell felt endless. Zainab's mind raced. How did she let it come to this? How did a simple desire for luxury and escape from her humble roots lead her to a death trap? She remembered the first time Malik looked at her. The way his dark eyes held a promise of danger disguised as excitement. She remembered the gifts, the private beach houses, the expensive perfumes. All of it, a facade. "Faster," she panted, yanking Amaka down the last flight. They burst into the hotel lobby, startling the night receptionist. "Help us," Zainab pleaded, her voice hoarse. "Please." But Malik and his men weren't far behind. The receptionist, wide-eyed with fear, simply backed away. There was no help coming. Zainab spotted the exit and with every ounce of strength left, shoved the glass doors open. She and Amaka sprinted into the dark, empty street, the cold night air hitting their skin like ice. They didn't stop running, not when Malik roared from the entrance, not when a sleek black car screeched out of the hotel driveway in pursuit, not even when their lungs burned from the effort. Only when they reached a secluded alleyway hidden by darkness did they collapse, gasping, crying, and broken. Zainab clutched her shoulder, blood still oozing from the wound. Amaka sobbed quietly, her entire body shaking. "We're alive," Zainab whispered, though the words felt hollow. "We made it." But Lola hadn't. And neither of them would ever be the same again. The silence of the alley wrapped around them, broken only by the distant roar of Malik's car as it sped past. Searching, Zainab's mind spiraled. What if they found them? What if this wasn't over? She gripped Amaka's trembling hand. "We need to leave this city." Amaka blinked through her tears. "Where will we go?" Zainab's jaw tightened. "Anywhere but here." The night was far from over. The roar of Malik's car echoed through the dark streets, a sinister reminder that danger was just a heartbeat away. Zainab's heart pounded louder than the screech of the tires as she and Amaka sprinted down the deserted road, their designer heels long abandoned somewhere along the way. The chilly night air bit at their skin, but fear was a far greater force pushing them forward. "Faster, Amaka! He's catching up!" Zainab's voice cracked, a mix of panic and exhaustion. Amaka, struggling to keep pace, gasped, "Where are we going? There's nowhere to hide!" Just then, the glimmer of headlights sliced through the night, a taxi approaching from the opposite direction. The driver, a middle-aged man with a scruffy beard and bloodshot eyes, slowed down the moment his gaze landed on Zainab's voluptuous figure. Her tight, torn dress clung to her curves, a stark contrast to her distressed expression. Her dark skin glistened with sweat, and the tear along her thigh exposed even more than she realized. Despite the fear in her eyes, she was a vision of chaos and beauty, and the driver's initial smirk of lust quickly faded as he noticed the terror in the girl's eyes. The driver's voice broke the silence. "Why una they run like this? Wetin happen?" he asked, his voice gruff with curiosity. "No time to explain," Zainab shouted. "Please, just drive, they're after us." A glance in the rearview mirror showed Malik's sleek car barreling closer. "Abeya, go, go, go!" Amaka cried, tugging the car door open. The driver, perhaps out of fear or the instinct to protect the helpless girls, slammed his foot on the gas the moment they tumbled into the back seat. The tires screeched against the asphalt, and the taxi shot forward, leaving Malik's car swerving to a halt behind them. Zainab clutched Amaka's hand tightly, both of them gasping for air. Sweat mixed with the blood seeping from the gash on Zainab's shoulder, and the torn strap of her dress kept slipping down her arm, but she was too shaken to fix it. The driver kept glancing at them through the rearview mirror. "Wetin really happen? You girls look like, say person want kill Una." Amaka broke down, sobbing. "They were going to kill us. They already have our friend. Lola, we couldn't save her." Zainab, still in shock, simply stared out the window, watching the city lights blur as they sped through the quiet streets. She remembered Lola's last glance, a mixture of confusion and betrayal, before Malik's men closed in on her. The guilt gnawed at her insides. After what felt like an eternity, the driver asked, "Where I go carry Una go? Police station?" "No," Zainab snapped. "Just take us to the hostel. We can't go to the police. They won't help us." The driver muttered something under his breath, but didn't argue. He drove on, the car humming with an uneasy silence. When they finally reached the school gates, the hostel entrance was still locked for the night. It was a few hours till dawn, and the security guards wouldn't open the doors until morning. The girls staggered out of the taxi, shivering in the cold. The driver, now clearly uneasy himself, gave them one last glance. "Una sure say una go day okay?" Zainab managed a weak nod. "We'll be fine." The driver lingered for a moment before driving off into the night. Left with nowhere to go, Zainab and Amaka huddled outside the hostel gates. The night air was brutal, and the adrenaline that had once kept them moving now gave way to exhaustion and pain. Amaka sank onto the pavement, pulling her knees to her chest. "What do we do now?" Zainab clenched her jaw, fighting back tears. "We wait." Minutes stretched into an hour, and the sky began to lighten with hints of dawn. The once empty street now buzzed with activity as students and early risers made their way past the hostel. Vendors were beginning to set up their stalls nearby, selling hot akara and bread, their curious eyes darting toward the disheveled girls. That's when the scene unfolded. Two girls, bloodied, disheveled, and still dressed in the remnants of what were once glamorous party outfits, sitting outside the hostel gates. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Is that Zainab?" a voice gasped. "Look at her dress. What happened to them? Did they get attacked?" The crowd grew, eyes wide with shock and judgment. Zainab could feel their stares searing into her skin, a mixture of pity and condemnation. She tugged at the torn strap of her dress, but it was useless. The damage was done. Her once flawless makeup was now streaked with tears, and her hair, once styled to perfection, hung in limp, messy strands around her face. One bold girl stepped forward. "Zainab, Amaka, what happened? Why do you both look like this?" Amaka opened her mouth, but only a sob escaped. She buried her face in her hands, unable to form words. Zainab, her face stone cold despite the burning humiliation, simply said, "We got into the wrong car." The statement hung in the air like a blade. The crowd exchanged knowing glances. The unspoken assumption was clear. They had gone out looking for rich men and paid the price. The hostel gates finally creaked open, and the security guard gawked at the scene before shaking his head and letting them in. His disapproving gaze lingered longer on Zainab's torn dress than on her wounded shoulder. As they entered the dorm, a painful truth weighed heavily on Zainab. They had escaped Malik's trap, but the nightmare was far from over. the whispers would spread like wildfire through campus. The rumors would twist and mutate, painting them as reckless girls who got what they deserved. Amaka collapsed onto her bed the moment they reached their shared room. "We need to tell someone," she muttered through her tears. "Who?" Zainab's voice was hollow. "Who will believe us?" The silence that followed was deafening. The days following their narrow escape felt like a blur, but for Zainab and Amaka, time didn't stop. Life at school moved forward with cruel indifference, but their hearts remained frozen in that dark hotel room, a place that still haunted their thoughts. The whispers hadn't died down. If anything, they had multiplied. It wasn't long before the entire campus buzzed with stories about the two girls, each version more scandalous than the last. Some claimed they had been caught in a lover's brawl with dangerous men. Others hinted at a botched attempt to blackmail wealthy YAHOO boys. The truth was irrelevant. The damage was done. Zainab had always been confident in her looks, her full, curvaceous figure that turned heads wherever she went, the way her dark skin gleamed under the sun, and how every outfit she wore seemed to cling to her like a second skin. It was a gift and a curse. People noticed her, sometimes for the wrong reasons, and now those same eyes stared at her with a mix of intrigue and judgment. "Z, we can't keep hiding," Amaka whispered one afternoon as they sat in their dorm room, the air thick with silence. "People will talk regardless. We need to face it." Zainab, gazing at her reflection in the cracked mirror, ran a hand down her hips. "Face what?" she muttered. "That we were stupid enough to trust men with blood money? That we almost got killed?" Amaka didn't answer. They both knew the truth. They had to move on, at least on the surface. The semester droned on. To escape the lingering trauma and the cruel stares, Zainab and Amaka found themselves gravitating toward the one place where they still held some power, their classroom. But even there, the tension followed. The lecturers noticed Zainab. How could they not? Her walk still commanded attention, and despite the haunting memories behind her green eyes, her voluptuous figure did most of the talking. She wasn't oblivious to the lingering gazes from certain lecturers, the ones who saw her not as a student, but as a fantasy. Dr. Felix, their literature professor, was one of them, a man in his late 40s with graying hair and a wedding band he often forgot to wear. His eyes lingered too long when Zainab answered questions in class. His smiles were just a little too friendly. One afternoon after class, he cornered her by the faculty office. "Zainab," his voice was a smooth purr, "I notice you've missed a few assignments lately. I hope everything is okay." She stiffened, clutching her books to her chest. "Yes, sir. I've been going through some things." Dr. Felix's hand brushed her arm. "Just a second too long. If you ever need someone to talk to or help with boosting your grades, my office is always open." Zainab forced a smile. "Thank you, sir." He left her with a lingering glance that made her stomach churn. Later that evening, Amaka tossed her phone onto her bed and sighed. "Gee, these lecturers are no different from those YAHOO boys. They just have smaller pockets." Zainab leaned against the wall, silent. In a twisted way, the attention from their lecturers gave them something to focus on, a way to regain some control. They didn't indulge, not fully, but they played the game. Flirty smiles when they needed to, subtle touches on the arm, lingering eye contact. It wasn't about desire, it was about survival. When mid-semester exams came, Zainab knew she wasn't fully prepared. Missing classes and assignments had taken a toll, but she wasn't about to fail. Not now, not when failure would mean going home, explaining everything to her parents. One evening, as they studied in their dorm, a soft knock interrupted them. "Who's there?" Amaka called. "Zainab," came a familiar voice. Her heart sank. It was her mother. The door swung open to reveal Mama Zainab, a short, stout woman in a simple wrapper and blouse, her face lined with worry. Beside her was Baba Zainab, tall and stern, his weathered hands clutched behind his back. Zainab forced a smile. "Mama, Baba." What are you doing here? Mama Zainab stepped in, eyes scanning the tiny dorm room. We came to see our daughter. Is that a crime? No, of course not. Zainab replied, her voice a tad too cheerful. Baba Zainab spoke, his voice deep and steady. We heard things, Zainab, about you and men. Her stomach twisted. Rumors, Baba, just rumors. Mama Zainab's eyes softened, but worry still clouded them. You are all we have. We struggled to send you here. We sold land. We borrowed money. Don't shame us. Tears burned at Zainab's eyes. I would never. Her father's gaze didn't waver. We trust you, but be careful. The world is not kind to girls like you. After a tense silence, Mama Zainab unpacked the food she brought. Jollof rice, fried plantains, and a small container of pepper soup. Zainab's heart ached as she realized how much they had given just to keep her in school. When her parents finally left, Amika squeezed her hand. We have to do better. Zainab nodded, blinking back tears. We will. But deep down, she wondered if it was already too late.